Behind every Starfleet badge was chaos the cameras never showed. Mini dresses, toupees, censors, and missing wigs. This was the fashion battlefield of Star Trek.
The following program is brought to you in living color by Trek World.
The following video is the most current in a series of videos that will give you a truly unique viewpoint of the behind-the-scenes happenings during production of Star Trek: The Original Series. The video is based entirely and exclusively on the book Inside Star Trek, which was written by Herb Solow and Bob Justman. You will find an affiliated link in the description that will take you to Amazon to check on availability of a good deal. I highly recommend that you buy a copy of this book and read it. Between this book and The Making of Star Trek by Stephen Whitfield and Gene Roddenberry, you have the only insiders present at those earliest days to carry these stories forward. Or, as they say, straight from the horse's mouth. Whenever I go back through the book, I'm reminded that Star Trek's costumes weren't just wardrobe choices. They were battlegrounds. Every tunic, every mini-dress, every wig perched precariously atop a sweating actor's head came with an entire history of arguments, compromises, and last-minute miracles. And what fascinates me most is how this war wasn't fought in silence. It was loud, messy, and strangely emotional. Because costumes weren't just fabric, they were identity, politics, and the struggle to define what a future humanity should look like. Let me take you back to those early days at Desilu, when the creative team gathered around sketches and swatches, trying to design a visual language that matched Roddenberry's ambitions. These weren't trivial decisions. They were asked to imagine clothing not just for characters, but for an utopian society. Something familiar yet aspirational. And if you listen closely to the book, you can hear the stress, the sighs, the frustration, the laughter that always sounded just a little too tired. The first wave of problems came from NBC's censors. It's easy to forget now, but 1960s network television wasn't built for daring wardrobe choices. The miniskirt era was only just taking shape, and Star Trek's early designs from William Ware Theiss pushed boundaries that the network wasn't sure America was ready for. And yet, Roddenberry insisted, absolutely insisted, that women in his future didn't dress modestly because modesty was no longer a prison. Censors disagreed. And so, the costume war began. One moment in the book stands out vividly. There's this heated back and forth between the production staff and network representatives, the latter warning that the skirts were too short, too modern, too provocative. The production team pushed back, arguing that if humanity had evolved past sexism, then clothing could reflect confidence instead of shame. That argument didn't end the battle, but it shifted it. The network couldn't quite say no, but they couldn't say yes without conditions either. So Star Trek ended up in that liminal space where every costume was a negotiation, not just between art and practicality, but between idealism and 1960s broadcast rules. Then there was the issue of fabric. The production didn't have the budget to test materials the way big studios could. They ordered bolts of colorful velour, thinking it would photograph beautifully under stage lights. It did, for about a week. Then the fabric began to stretch, shrink, warp, sweat through. The collar lines started sagging. Sleeves lost their shape. And one of the running jokes preserved in the book is how the uniforms would fit completely differently from one day to the next. You can almost hear the exasperation as someone jokes,
"Yesterday, he was a captain. Today, he looks like he borrowed the shirt from a cadet."
But nothing, absolutely nothing, was as chaotic as the hair. And here, the book becomes downright comedic. Because wigs were everywhere. Kirk's, Uhura's, Rand's towering beehive. Guest stars who arrived with hair that didn't match continuity. Stunt doubles whose hair couldn't be made to look remotely like the actors they were doubling. And worst of all, hair pieces that disappeared. Not metaphorically, literally gone. There's an unforgettable anecdote where the crew lost a wig entirely, a crucial piece needed for continuity. The book records the panic. People tearing through dressing rooms, assistants checking trash bins, someone running across the lot yelling,
"Check the bathroom! Check the bathroom!"
They found it eventually, but not intact. The glue was wrong. The fibers were burned by the lights. The piece was ruined. They had to scramble for a replacement while the director stalled for time. And that was just a Tuesday. Grace Lee Whitney faced her own unique hair saga. Her enormous wig wasn't just a style choice. It was a practical way to give 𝐬𝐻𝐫𝐽 a distinctive silhouette. But the book reveals how heavy it was, how hot, how painful. She'd returned from takes with indents on her scalp, sweat dripping down her neck, wardrobe rushing in with tissues and cooler fans between setups. 𝐼ce, for his part, never stopped trying to innovate. He had this philosophy, something the book captures brilliantly, that in the future, clothing should be simple, elegant, and cut to flatter movement. That's how we got those iconic lines. The way shirts hug the torso or draped just right across the shoulder. And it's also how we got the 𝐼ce titillation theory, the idea that a costume should stay on the body not through button or zipper, but through structural integrity, meaning it only stayed in place because gravity refused to let it fall. A brilliant theory, an absolute nightmare for the crew, because every time an actress sat, turned, or breathed too deeply, the future nearly fell off. Wardrobe had to monitor every angle on set. Camera operators would shout if a neckline slipped. Directors had to reset shots when something revealed more than standards and practices would allow. And 𝐼ce, bless him, never relented, because he believed the future was beautiful, confident, and bold. The censors disagreed. The producers negotiated, and the actresses endured. Then there were the male uniforms, which had their own tragedies. The velour not only stretched, but trapped heat miserably. Shatner's uniform famously shrank so much after repeated cleanings that it had to be redesigned. In the book, you can feel the mounting frustration, actors sweating under the lamps while their shirts slowly crept up toward their midriffs. And let's talk about Shatner's hairpiece, because the book doesn't shy away from it. Maintaining the captain's iconic look was a full-time job. The wig had to be styled every day. It had to be secured before each shot. Crew members monitored its shape as closely as they monitored props. On long shooting days, the adhesive would loosen, causing the piece to shift. They'd stop filming, rush him to a chair, and glue everything back down. Sometimes it took minutes, sometimes it took hours. It wasn't vanity. It was continuity. The camera sees everything, and the wig had to be perfect. Uhura's wig was a different battle entirely. Nichelle Nichols needed something that could withstand heat, dance numbers, quick turns in the chair, and the glare of lights overhead. Her early wigs wilted, frizzed, lost structure. Each time she walked onto the bridge, the hair team tightened, pinned, tucked, and prayed. And then there's the single most heartbreaking hair story in the book, Leonard Nimoy's tortured relationship with the Spock ears. Technically not wardrobe, but spiritually? Absolutely. The ears were prosthetics designed to create a clean, simple alien silhouette. But the glue burned. The removal hurt. Sweat threatened to peel them off mid-scene. And the worst part? Early versions didn't fit right, so hair had to be styled in ways that disguised the edges. Some days the hair team succeeded, other days they didn't. Nimoy endured it quietly, professionally, but those around him noticed the toll. These small battles built up over time. The costume department started arriving earlier and leaving later than almost anyone else. They developed checklists, emergency kits, backup uniforms, boxes of spare insignias, extra boots, duplicate wigs, fresh collars, new tunic patterns designed to resist the shrinking plague of velour. But the most important thing the book captures is something you can't measure in fabric or pins: pride. For all the frustration, they believed in what they were creating. They believed these outfits mattered. They believed the look of the show reflected the soul of the show: clean, progressive, bold, and hopeful. Star Trek didn't just imagine a better future, it tried to dress like one. And that's why the costume war still feels meaningful. These weren't arguments about hemlines or hairpieces, they were arguments about identity, about how evolved humans would carry themselves, about how women could dress in a world that had outgrown judgment, about how a captain should look stepping into the unknown. That tension, that fire, that pursuit of something better, it's woven into every thread on that bridge. Those mini dresses weren't just fabric. Those wigs weren't just sculpted hair. Those uniforms weren't just color-coded tunics. They were visions, ideals.